I got it. It's recording now, right?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Thank you. The public is encouraged to follow along using the posted agenda unless I, Brian Turbett, Chief Procurement Officer, notes otherwise. We're now turning to the first item on the agenda, and before we do so, permit me to cover some ground rules for effective and clear conduct of our business and to ensure accurate meeting minutes. I, Brian Turbett, Chief Procurement Officer, we won't introduce each speaker because it's the Jetties Beach Review Committee. We will conduct a review of the 3 proposals that were submitted timely and in accordance with the RFP for the lease of a 5-year term. So I will call the meeting to order of the Jetties Beach Concession Review Committee, and we can begin the discussion and review of the submitted proposals. The submitted proposals were by Swim at Jetties LLC, Sandbar AC LLC, and Hither Creek doing business as Millie's the Harpoon. So I'll open it up to however the committee would like to proceed in the discussion. We can start with one proposal in its entirety. We can start with one block of the comparative criteria in its entirety. However the committee thinks is best to do this.
Would it be best, I'm trying to remember from 5 years ago, as a block so that we can properly compare? Okay. Does that make sense to everyone? Each proposal in the same, so we don't have to keep going back.
Okay.
Yeah, I like doing each comparative criteria as we go down.
Okay. So who would like to start?
Howard, can we ask a question from previous experience in this? Is when we are, we've done our criteria and made our comments, as far as what we're commenting on is the proposal in front of us. Obviously, some proposals may be businesses we are aware of or have experience with. As far as, I'm trying to see how I make this question or say this comment, as far as making comments based on knowledge of the applicant versus what's in the actual proposal. Does that make sense on the question?
It does, and if I think I understood it, I can respond to the fact that what we're reviewing is the proposals in front of us, and the Assistant Procurement Officer is conducting reference checks based on all of the references that the 3 respondents provided, and those will hopefully be done very shortly. But our focus is on the proposals as they've been submitted.
Great, thank you.
Does that answer your question, Amy?
Yes, yeah. Because I found some of my comments or criteria. I wanted to make sure I was using what I had in front of me rather than my experience with maybe a particular applicant. Okay.
Okay.
Great.
So a question, Brian, and maybe to Amy. You were suggesting, Amy, that we go across, like everybody for number 1, everybody for number 2, everybody for 3, and everybody for 4. Do I understand that correctly?
Correct.
Yeah.
Okay.
Before we start, I need to rename myself, but I think that's Nick. But if it is the individual that's listed as NJ Nass, if you could put your first and last name, it would be appreciated.
Okay.
Okay, so who would like to lead us off?
I'll start.
Okay, excellent. Thank you, Amy.
Okay. Do we have to start with the responder portion or go right into the questions or the comparative criteria?
Well, we can. So we're dealing with question number 1 or comparative criteria, which is plan of the services, their business plan. So we would just go across and discuss what rating that we had assigned to each of the 3.
Okay.
And the rationale for that, and then we can have additional discussion if the committee feels necessary on that particular topic.
Okay, so I'll review each criteria point so folks know what we're discussing. As you said, the first comparative criteria, the responder would be number one, the plan of services or their business plan. The ratings are as follows. HA being highly advantageous is the proposer's response is superior and excels at addressing the lease agreement terms, Exhibit A, and displays the resources and specifically states the ability to meet the requirements of a seasonal beach restaurant, bar, retail shop, bathhouse, and event venue with a focus on the island community from the third weekend in May through Columbus Day with potentially limited hours in May, June, September, and October. And the second is A for advantageous, meaning the proposer's response is satisfactory and meets the lease agreement terms, Exhibit A, and displays the resources and specifically states the ability to meet the requirements as stated again above. The third is NA, meaning non-advantageous, I believe. The proposer's response does not fully meet the criteria or leaves a question or issue about their ability to address the lease agreement terms in Exhibit A and does not display the resources as stated above. And U, unsatisfactory, proposal does not address the criteria. We will start with the first applicant, Swim at Jetties LLC. I'll start with my rating there was highly advantageous. I thought it was a well done response that addressed all of the terms as provided. I will continue to the others. Again, Swim at Jetties LLC is the first one we're discussing. Janet?
I had an A for that one, because I thought that the recommended children's activities was a distortion to the food service program. But I did like that they had a pretty comprehensive marketing plan.
Right. So in some of that, and I'll just state too, I had some comments similar to that, that I think I re-put under quality control. So I think I'll have some comments like that too as well. I wasn't sure where to put that as well. I thought in this case, they at least addressed the terms and resources. So that's why I gave that opinion.
I'll go. I had advantageous. I felt that they did meet most of the criteria and what we were asking for in the lease terms. I didn't see much or anything about bathhouse. And so that was one thing, but they do have a facilities individual on staff. There was a lot of, and I understand with their proposal, it's a little hard because they're not established while others were. So there was a lot of, we plan to, we will, but community event options and packages, discount for purchase. I thought that was an interesting concept. It wasn't really something that we had in our proposal though, but there was some focus on that. So, but they did have a sample menu. They talked about retail, and it seemed like their team members had similar experience. And I think it's later on, like you mentioned, Amy, there's a few other items that I think I actually put in other areas, which I made a comment on here, but I can wait for those as well.
Yeah, I did as well. Thank you. Michael?
I had them as HA. There were several things they talked about, the emphasizing sustainability, local source and zero waste. I think they mentioned breakfast, which I had a question about because I don't think that was necessarily spec'd by us, and somebody can correct me if I'm wrong. But it was still an interesting piece, whereas others said that they would have maybe breakfast items later. Menu was strong. I thought they had a lot of good ideas for promotional events.
Brian?
First of all, I know that there's individuals from all three of the responders here, and I just would like to first take a second and thank everyone for the effort that they put into this award, this bid posting. We certainly, as a group, the five of us, recognize the the amount of time that it takes to put into this, and so we certainly appreciate the effort that everybody put in, and I just wanted to make that note before we continued. I had them as HA. I think that, you know, they had a few interesting concepts in here, certainly, and I thought the breakfast thing was something that was an interesting concept, and I think in the RFP, Mike, it does say that it's optional and it can be considered, so I think it's an interesting concept. The hybrid service model was a little interesting to me as I was reading it, and they certainly had, I thought they did a fairly good job of kind of identifying some of the activities or the events that they thought may be able to be done or take place. So I thought that it certainly met the criteria for the HA designation.
Great, thank you. I will move on to the next respondent, which is Sandbar AC LLC. I'll start. I rated that as well, highly advantageous. Obviously, this is a current concessionaire, and I thought that they did a very good job of demonstrating their experience and different things that they would like to address and move forward with. The plan was comprehensive, and again, addressed all of the terms and then how they would grow into the future, specifically on community events, and all the elements of the restaurant and bar and retail section as well. So I gave them that rating as well. Janet?
I gave them an HA too for all the reasons that you cited, and I thought that their strong emphasis on a family-focused business plan, really focused on food and beach equipment, was a solid aspect of the plan.
Great, excellent. Rachel?
Same. I think that they demonstrated it well, highlighting what their current business plan does and then how to improve upon that, maybe in areas that address additional things. And they touched on all the areas that I saw related to the functional area, retail, bathhouse, local vendors use, and like Mike mentioned for swim, I hadn't mentioned that they talk about the sustainability aspect too with local vendors. And so I think that keeps with the community commitment that we asked for as part of the lease.
Great, thank you. Mike, what do you think?
I had them as highly advantageous as well. You know, just looking at the menu, as you mentioned, Amy being the incumbent, but looking at their children's menu, which was affordable, they did have breakfast sandwiches. The one thing that I didn't see as clearly was the retail plan. And that gets into your question earlier. You know that they have that aspect, but I didn't necessarily see it in their presentation, or I didn't read carefully enough. And so I think that, you know, you guys already covered several things.
Great, thank you. Brian, your thoughts?
My thoughts, I think I had rated them as highly advantageous. I thought that they did a good job really highlighting and denoting the operations and where they wanted to improve, and the culture that they've created in the community, the sense of community that they've created at the facility, and their focus on the community and the aspects of community being charitable giving and things that they've done to highlight their commitment to the community. So I think that they this one was another one that really approached and met the requirements for the highly advantageous.
Right, correct. Yeah, in addition, I thought in regards to my question, I was happy it demonstrated all those things and what their plan is rather than having us to rely on what we may know of the location. So I thought it demonstrated that well. We'll move on to the third applicant, Hither Creek DBA Millie's, with a DBA of the Harpoon for this location. I rated that as advantageous. I thought, and again, this goes to my question, it relied a little too heavily on knowledge of their current operations. I thought it did certainly, it was satisfactory and met the terms and addressed things, but I thought it was light as far as details. And didn't show us how their operation, even their current operation, would translate to a location like Jetties that may be similar to their current one, but not exactly similar. So I had to kind of rate that advantageous for that reason. Janet, your thoughts?
I had the same thoughts on that. I like that they emphasized food over alcohol, but I
Right.
did think that it was a repetition of the program at Millie's. And I questioned the whole notion about doing capital improvements in lieu of rent.
Yeah, I actually, had a question about that on two of these as far as putting in information of that sort. I tried to kind of push that to the side because I'm not sure that taking over that is part of it. It's more of the services that we're looking for. So I don't know if that was correct, but I agree. I question that part too as well, and try not to consider that in there. Thank you. Rachel.
Well, I'll add to that. I had advantageous, but sort of a wavering question mark there. Some of it related to the improvements mentioned. It's not a requirement, but what we had in there as a requirement was the management of the premise and the minor repairs, which I thought the other two had sort of addressed. I think Swim, which I didn't mention when we talked about them, had like a log or something and sort of indicated that they would do the rounds, but I didn't really see that. Any premise maintenance, I didn't understand. It seems like they had $1 earmarked, but didn't really elaborate to what that meant. And I'm not sure that really complies with what we are attempting to do there. And I didn't mention it when we talked about Swim's proposal either, but there was some reference to the premise with an awning, which we know has been changed, or a new awning, which we know. Anyways, their menu, unlike, I didn't mention it for the others as well, I thought it was a little more minimal in terms of offering. And I saw really no description of retail in this one either, other than sort of stating what they currently do. So I'm guessing that meant that they would duplicate that at their, so they just sort of said, we have experience, but I didn't really see, well, what. And again, no bathhouse was mentioned on this one either. They do show a little island commitment level, but for some of those limitations and unclear things, I put advantageous because they meet them, but not to the extent the others.
Great, thank you. Mike, your thoughts?
I had advantageous. I noted the same question about capital improvements. I think that Amy brought up. Their menu was fine, a little bit different than what is maybe accustomed, but that doesn't mean that it's better or worse. I did have a question. I think I saw the hours of operation being 11 a.m. to 11 p.m. And I had a question about that because I'm not sure that would even be authorized and what that would mean. So I don't know if this is an appropriate time to raise that question.
Yeah, that would be, some licensing things as well that we would probably deal with. There's some laws as far as hours on liquor licenses, and entertainment would probably be capped at 10 p.m. I don't think it would be something that would, be a strike against them if they put a, longer hour than we would approve. If they said they're only open from 3 to 5, that would be a problem. But I think the ending time would end up becoming under our licensing. Liquor by chance has to be allowed till 11 p.m. unless we have other reasons for pulling it back. And entertainment would be based on probably the noise ordinance. So things like that, I think we would work out in that process.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. And actually on some of those points, Brian, as far as a question, when they talk about capital improvements and things of that sort, I look at it and tell me if I'm wrong, the difference between IFB and RFP, where we're looking at these proposals for their range of services rather than dollar amounts, that would be an IFB. Would that be correct in looking at it that way, that it's part of it, but it can't be based on a dollar amount? Is that correct?
Well, so this is part of their business plan, so we could certainly, you could take it into account as you evaluate plan of services, the business plan. I would note that if in looking at the RFP itself, I think that it specifically talks about the awning itself and says that that the proposal I think is that we're not. I thought it said somewhere in here that we're not going to do an awning covering that. It's we would require written approval for a shade system, or does say installation of an awning, but I don't know if we'd actually allow another one to be attached to the building at this point. But with regard to capital improvements, I mean, you certainly could, as you look at their business plan, and the business plan, we could certainly take it into consideration in terms of the criteria. I had them, and I'll just kind of segue into it, and because it's part of my discussion point too, Amy. I had them as advantageous because I think that some of the business plan was focused on the operation that's currently in existence, and it was difficult for me when I was reading it to draw the correlation to how it would transition into that facility and that structure. I think that the $300,000 investment that's mentioned in here is great as part of the business plan, but I think where I found it to be lacking most likely is what is that made up of? You know, what do you could, there was a number presented to us in here that said we want to contribute $300,000 in capital investment, but I don't know exactly what that thought was or where it was. So it's hard to understand where that was going to be focused for me. So I think that, you know, overall, I think it was, the business plan made sense, but I think for me, it was just a little bit too focused on the operation that's currently in existence at another location versus how that would transition and how it would fit into the location that's currently, that had the RFP out for.
Great. Agreed. Okay, so I think that covers that question, correct? We've got. Yep, great. Okay. Next. Who's next?
Quality control. What's the next one?
Yep. You want me to keep doing it?
You're doing a great job, Amy. As
All
I report
right.
what everybody's written.
Otherwise, I'll take it if they're taking turns.
I think that you're doing a great job.
All right. Okay. So number 2, we're talking quality control. And quality control, highly advantageous would be that the proposal clearly demonstrates superior quality control and superior availability of resources, staff, and relevant experience to perform the lease agreement terms requested. Advantageous would be that the proposal demonstrates satisfactory quality control and satisfactory availability of resources. NA being the staffing plan is vague and does not address scheduling and enforcement. I think this was a typo. It is unclear how the proposer will ensure parking is generating the anticipated revenue. I don't think that's right, but okay. And then the proposal does not address the criterion. So we will start with Swim at Jetties LLC. I put some comments that were made prior. I think I put in this. I rated it advantageous. You know, a lot of it, obviously, in this case, being in theory, but how would it be in practice? One of the things we were talking about staffing in this area too, in quality control, the hybrid service model, although, you know, it's an interesting concept. I'm concerned about the idea of, you know, rushing guests through and having, as I mentioned, a high turnover of tables to create greater revenue for the town. I think in my mind, I'm looking for the service and the quality of experience there. I don't think we're looking to necessarily rush people through. It's an interesting concept that you can do, but that was my concern there as well. And as far as availability of resources and staff and relevant experience, there's obviously some experience in the restaurant business here, but not running a business locally. So that is why I took that down to advantageous in that area as well. Janet, your comments.
I had it as an A as well, advantageous. I thought the hybrid model, while it reduced staffing needs, and in a summer like this, that would be a good idea, that it could ultimately jeopardize the quality of service in the visitor experience. The rushing guests through and the like was of a concern to me. There's certainly a lot of restaurant experience, but I didn't see it in anything like this kind of place.
Correct. Great, thank you. Rachel, your thoughts?
Advantageous. Again, team members obviously had experience. They sort of laid out under quality control in there how they were doing it. A lot of it seems like standard things that would be required anyways, like serve safe and the typical trainings, which is fine. It's great to outline. I wasn't clear. It seems like there's one member that has some experience in a similar environment, but it was very unclear of how long. So not sure how that correlates out. They did indicate like everybody mentioned, the hybrid model. I don't know if that's what we're really looking for, is that type of quick turnout or not. But it's sort of an interesting concept of prior business plan models with the current one as well. It's almost merging the two. So I'm not sure how great that will be or not. So, and that's not what we indicated, but I like it as a concept to think about. My only concern with that was, while it's great that they indicate they might have a need for lower staffing levels, they don't really address still how they would staff it, and assuming with on-island staffing, things like that. So I was a little hard to maybe conceptually understand that one.
Right. Agreed. Okay, Mike, your thoughts?
I had advantageous as well. I didn't put it in your terms, theory versus practice, but that really strikes a chord with me, because we don't know. We do know that the other two have know what staffing on Nantucket takes. And so that was a question for me. The hybrid service model, I had written down turnover isn't our goal. But it too strikes a chord in what we have just gone through, because that requires a different model. The pandemic requires a different model. And so I did have them. I did like the fact that they specifically addressed, the different trainings, liquor law training, compliance, and CPR training, which I thought was an important piece for that resource.
Correct. Great. Thank you very much. Brian, thoughts? Brian, are you talking? We don't hear you.
Sorry, I had myself on mute. So I said that I had rated them advantageous, the proposal as advantageous as well. I think there was some good points in helping us understand the food and the training for employees. But what I think I didn't see here was really something that really outlined an understanding of the staffing that it takes to run this. And I think that with their proposal for a hybrid model, I think I was really looking for more in-depth and quality control of what that model would look like and what it would take to do. It's an interesting concept, so I don't want to. I think that I'm not I'm not hoping that we're rushing people in and out, because I think one of the great things about that is that you can sit down and it can be somewhat leisurely. But the hybrid model certainly was an interesting concept, and I think that where it missed for me between HA and A was really there wasn't a real in-depth explanation of the staffing that would be required to do that, and how that might differ from the regular restaurant concept that they were talking about. So that's why I came in at the advantageous.
Correct. Thanks. Yeah, I think it also highlights you need to understand the location and some of I don't think it would reduce staffing to such a degree, because the running and the size of the location versus the size of the kitchen and prep area is probably what slows things down, and you'll still need staffing for that. So I think there's maybe a lack of understanding of the locations needs there. Okay, so we'll move on to Sandbar Act LLC. Excuse me, let me move my pages here. Quality control. Again, I rated highly advantageous. Obviously, they are able to display and describe here the challenges, the number of meals they're able to serve, how they tackle that, the learning curve that comes with that as well. And having run this year-round business here for several years. So again, advantageous on the side of experience. And then I thought they did a good job of describing it here, showing it, giving us actual data. So someone who did not have experience with the restaurant would be able to understand that and see what their concept was and their quality control. Janet, comments on that? Ooh, unmute, Jan. I can unmute you. Oh, go ahead.
I gave it a highly advantageous as well. The staff is experienced with the setting and the operation. They know their volume in their program.
Right. Yeah, great. Thank you. Rachel, your thoughts on that?
Same, but I do think this one group obviously has a clear advantage over the other proposals for simply being in the location. Their staffing plan, they have an idea of what it takes to run it and even an idea if they wanted to expand upon or adjust certain things, they already have that, rather than trying to conceptually manage it or utilize what they're doing in another location. And they sort of hit on the management and addressing each of the areas, concession, bath house, all the way over.
Great, thank you. Michael?
I would echo everybody's comments. I have it at HA, certainly an advantage if you're doing it well, if you're the incumbent, and they have shown that they know what it takes in terms of staffing patterns, and their experience, speaks to that. So I think that was the strength of their bid.
Right, exactly. Thank you so much. Brian?
I also rated them HA. I think that they did a nice job of outlining who the primary team is and their understanding of the restaurant. They also indicated, how much staff it takes for them to run this restaurant. They certainly went into some detail about how they have managed the restaurant and how they've adapted to some of the challenges and what they've done to implement change to get to implement better quality control throughout the time that they've already had it. So I really think that it showed a clear understanding to me of the understanding of the business operations, what it takes to run the facility, and the commitment to the quality control. So for those reasons, I rated it 8J.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And I'll move on to Hither Creek, DBA Millie's and the Harpoon. In this one, I gave it advantageous, and actually kind of went through advantageous and NA, being that it felt vague, similar comments to what I had in the last round, being light on details, and again, telling us rather than showing us how their current experience in operation would translate to a location like Jetties, Again, understanding that they have extensive experience and can come up with that. But if I'm looking at what's in front of me and not relying on that knowledge or experience, it was vague to me as to what that plan would be and how it would address this specific nature of this location. Janet, your thoughts?
I gave it an advantageous. I think the staff has experience in a busy beachside setting on island, but I agree with you, it was a little thin on the detail. And it basically relied on the description of what they're currently doing as an example of what they would be doing.
Right, correct. Thank you. Rachel.
I did the same advantageous. I sort of had highly advantageous for a little bit there. Obviously, they do have, I believe it was 11 years indicated in their proposal as a restaurant, beach, retail experience in a similar location on the island. So I felt that that was a benefit, that even though a lot of their proposals indicated that that's what they know and it makes sense, but it is relevant and it would apply and they could probably carry it over. I just found, and kind of looking at these again, their proposal was a little too vague for me to do it as highly advantageous. So I did sort of waver between the two. They indicate they can staff, but there's no real elaboration there either. So I struggled with that a little bit in terms of rating between the two.
Great, thank you. Michael?
I waffled as well, Rachel, with between highly advantageous and advantageous. And some of that was probably from what I know rather than from what was in the bid presentation, because I do think they know what it takes to run the sort of concessions that we're looking for. But the detail wasn't there. It sort of left it to us to know and expected us to know, which some of us do and maybe some of us don't. But so that's why I ended up with advantageous.
Great, thank you. Brian?
Thanks, Amy. I too, like some of you, most of you, kind of was going back and forth between highly advantageous and advantageous. I think it's clear, based on the operation that they currently run, that they have an understanding. Again, I think that what was missing in the proposal under this quality control segment was really how that understanding translates to running an operation at Jetties Beach. And I think that I had it been a little bit more in depth about how they saw the staffing working or how they saw the service working, and something in that respect, it might have been able to get me to highly advantageous, but without it, it was really kind of difficult to get to that point based on the proposal itself. So for those reasons, I did score that as an advantageous.
Right, thank you. Yes, we know they had the experience, but obviously this location has its very specific needs as well. Okay, so I think we have covered number 2. If I can move on to number 3. Number 3 category is the experience working with concessions, municipal concessions, or on Nantucket Island specifically. Highly advantageous would be proposer clearly demonstrates superior community-focused concessions, retail, shop, bathhouse, and event venue experience on Nantucket, or a similar busy seasonal beach environment as Nantucket for more than 5 years. Advantageous would be the proposer demonstrates satisfactory ability to address those things and has experience in a similar environment for more than 3 years, but not less than 5. NA would be that they do not demonstrate adequate ability to address community-focused concessions and the other items, and does not have experience of more than 3 years in a similar environment or leaves questions about it. Unsatisfactory would be that the proposal does not address the criteria as just stated. We'll start with the proposal for swim at Jetties LLC. I rated it advantageous. I thought, again, it was difficult. They certainly have folks in here, someone on the team who certainly worked at several restaurant locations on Nantucket, other retail locations, and then obviously the chef who certainly has professional experience in the restaurant business. So probably could adapt, however, did not have actual local business experience running a business. So, definitely some Nantucket experience there, but not really running a business. So gave them the benefit of the advantageous, but I didn't think obviously this would be a new type of venture for this group. Janet, your thoughts?
I also said advantageous. I think the chef has a great deal of experience that would probably translate into the setting. But it was unclear to me about their proposed programming, like the children's activity, if they had anybody with that kind of experience on board to meet what they had outlined. And I did note that there was some Nantucket experience, but it wasn't necessarily at a beach.
Correct. Okay, thank you. Rachel?
Same, advantageous for pretty much as you guys have mentioned. They have some great conceptual ideas about free activities, which is an interesting concept. Only knowing what I know, the location even before, and many years ago when I actually worked there, I'm curious to know how that would even be able to be incorporated in that location safely. It is a very busy location. And again, they had mentioned doing things on, poor weather days that might benefit from having like the awning concept to do those type of activities. But I'm not sure that will actually equate to actual real life work. They did have some great community focus efforts that they noted by team members and fundraising, usage of local vendors. The chef obviously has concession experience as well as municipal concession experience, which I thought was a benefit, but they don't really have the ACT business experience that we were mentioning as well to make it the highly advantageous. So I ended up saying advantageous.
Great, thank you. Michael?
I actually went highly advantageous here, but I did have a few questions and comments. They have a strong marketing person there, and that struck me as an opportunity. Maybe the bid is a little more of a risk, but for more reward. And so that was intriguing as I looked at it. But that risk reward debate is, you don't know until you're 3 years into it. But I liked the marketing, and the chef was very accomplished. I don't know that this is fair to say, but it did cross my mind. Will this challenge him enough? Because he's done several high-end things that he's gone on to the next thing. I'm not sure that we can really consider that, but it crossed my mind. If I might not have been hired to come to the district had somebody worried about the risk reward of bringing somebody from off island. So I had them as highly advantageous.
Okay, great. Thank you. Brian, thoughts? Brian, are you talking? You're
Can you hear
talking.
me?
Yeah, okay, there we go.
Okay, sorry. I went back and forth between highly advantageous and advantageous. I certainly, I think they articulated and identified some of the apparel and things that they would use in running the beach and the beach shop, and there certainly is some experience on Nantucket with at least one of the respondents. I think one of the issues for me is that there's not a lot of detail on the amount of time that one of the individuals spent at a couple different municipal concessions and beaches. So it was difficult for me to understand how long that was out of the individual's entire career. And I think the other thing in identifying that would have been helpful to actually understand is kind of the size of those locations, so that it would have been able to we would have been able to draw an easier correlation to whether it was a similar busy seasonal beach environment like we have here. So for those reasons, I felt that the proposal met the criteria for advantageous.
Great, thank you. Okay, I will move on to Sandbar Ag LLC. As far as experience working with concessions, municipal concessions, or on Nantucket Island specifically, highly advantageous. Obviously, this is where being the current concessionaire has its advantages. Obviously, highly advantageous. They have experience in all of that for many years, and prior to this location too as well. And I thought that was demonstrated. Janet.
I said highly advantageous as well. They've certainly experienced with Jetties already, and the staff is familiar with the setting and operations there.
Yep, thank you. Rachel?
Same, obviously they meet the 5 years being where they are. Maybe not more than but the community focused concession was, I know that there's an or in there of one, or like I mentioned with swim, they had mentioned experience with it and having some community, but it was far more evident in the Jetties of community focused, not just in their proposal, but also they had listed references or had written references at the end too that kind of expanded upon that. And so I placed a little weight on that as well. Versus the others that maybe have mentioned some community focused efforts, or maybe just mentioned they are, but not expanding upon it. So that was my rating for them.
Great. Thank you. Michael?
I had them as highly advantageous. This is, being the incumbent is a double-edged sword.
Right.
And if you're doing it well, then you have an advantage. If you're not doing it well, then that it works against you being the incumbent. And but I think that they understand how Nantucket works. The dollars that they've put into philanthropy have been evidenced, and so I have them as highly advantageous.
Thank you. Brian?
I unmuted this time, Amy.
Good job. You're getting there.
Only taken over a year.
I
You're off the mute button, right? I too, for many of the same reasons that everybody else has articulated, had rated this as highly advantageous. I think they certainly.
You muted.
How did you mute in the middle of a conversation?
I unmuted that. I don't know how I did.
That's
that.
impressive.
I know, right? So I'll start over. I too had rated them for many of the same reasons, highly advantageous. I think that in the proposal, they certainly identified all of their experience on Nantucket, not only just within Jetties, but at all of the locations in a seasonal beach environment, which I think the entire island really does qualify as.
Right.
I think they also focused a lot on they highlighted the focus on the community focus and some of those key points. And I think that really kind of for those two reasons, I found that the proposal met the criteria for the highly advantageous.
Great. Thank you so much. We'll move to the third applicant, Hither Creek DBA Millie's and the Harpoon. I rated it highly advantageous. Obviously, they have experience working with concessions on Nantucket Island well past 5 years. I'm looking at it now as far as if they demonstrated superior community focused concessions. Possibly not in the proposal, but still, I'll stick with highly advantageous as far as their experience in that area. Janet?
Yeah, I went with highly advantageous too. Obviously, their experience in Connecticut is relevant to working a busy beach concession.
Great, Rachel?
I had highly advantageous as well because of the 5+ years on Nantucket in a busy beach environment. But I will note it was for that because of the or. Like I mentioned before, they had said community focused, but I didn't really see an elaboration of it. And they seemed to mention a lot about events and doing that and their experience with events. And I wrote that in as a note that otherwise, if that 5+ years wasn't as part of the or, I might have done advantageous because I don't think we're looking for an event venue. We wanted to focus on the restaurant and that, and there is a cap on the amount of events or large scale events over 250 as well that they would even be able to do. And so I don't think that was what we were looking for out of our concession or municipal concession. But again, because they do have the experience that they have on Nantucket there, was highly advantageous.
Great, agree, thank you. Michael?
Highly advantageous experience on Nantucket. Nothing can equal it.
Great, thank you. Brian, let's see if you could do it.
I'm not touching
Oh, good
anything,
job.
right?
Okay.
So I think that this proposal clearly met the mark for highly advantageous. There's no question that the respondent has been involved and clearly does understand how to operate a retail shop and in a busy seasonal beach environment, having operated another facility here. So I don't think that that's really a question. I think so. I think for that reason, I rated it highly advantageous.
Okay, great. Okay, so we're down to number 4, which is references, highly advantageous, meaning the, are you talking?
So Amy, what I was,
Yep.
I'm gonna cut,
Go ahead.
I don't mean to cut you off, but I'm gonna interject.
Oh,
a
go
second.
for it.
So the assistant procurement officer, Rebecca, is still finalizing the calls to the references. Some of them have been provided. So we actually are not going to be able to rate that because we have to collate all of those responses and distribute them so that you can all, so we can have a meaningful conversation about it. As we're all aware, one did include a significant amount of references within it, the proposal itself. So I think in order to be fair to all the respondents, we should schedule a meeting early next week to have those finalized, go through that, and then make the steps on an ultimate recommendation with the plan to make that recommendation, write it up, and give it to the board on August 4th. I was
Okay,
hoping to do it for the July 21st meeting, but I don't know that we can do that and do it with and do it in a way that would
okay,
be really greatly done. So I think that would be the way, my suggestion to do that. So there are, we have to obviously she's making calls and writing it down and going through some of that. So I think that it would be better served to wait to discuss that one so that we all have the same information in front of us.
so does that mean the comments we have on our overall rankings would wait?
Yes, because you probably would want to hear from the when she compiles the information, because
Okay,
they certainly have provided all of them. We could argue individually probably have provided enough references to meet HA, but we don't know that. And you can make a logical leap of faith that everybody that they've put down is going to say, they provide superior quality service and everything. But I think as a matter of the process, we should wait, and when those are finished, we could come back and briefly discuss those, and then move on to the discussion of the overall rankings and what our vote on a recommendation.
okay.
Yeah, I was gonna say, because we know what they are, but we only have from one what they identify. So are we planning to get those back so that we can meet Monday? Because do we still have to post 48 hours?
We do. So I'm planning on working to have them done within the next 2 days. So hopefully by Friday night. But what I would ask is if people have time in a calendar, we could talk about it now for Tuesday, which would give us just a little bit extra time in case we missed a phone call or we played phone tag, which sometimes does happen with these types of things. So if we have time on Tuesday, if Monday's the best day, then we'll make it work with what we can get and finalize.
Okay. I'm good.
Does Tuesday the 20th work for people or no?
It depends on the time.
Yeah, that'd be
It's a
later.
lot easier for me. Monday afternoon is a lot easier for me, but I think it just depends on Tuesday.
Monday afternoon's fine.
Yeah, Monday afternoon is better for me.
There's one problem with Monday afternoon for some people. There is a funeral at 1 o'clock at St. Mary's for a
Former school
colleague.
employee, right?
Yeah, former school employee. So that if we had it at 3 o'clock or 2:30 is cutting it close, but it'd have to be 3 o'clock or after for me to be able to do that on Monday.
I'm fine, Mike, with 3 or 3:30, even starting at 3:30 if
I'm fine
five
with
of us
3:30.
wanted to. Okay.
Is that all right?
We will. Is that okay for Mike? 3:30 okay to start to do that?
That's fine with me. I hate to throw a monkey wrench, but
No, you're not.
That's
So what we'll do
appropriate.
is we'll post a meeting for 3:30. It'll be posted on the town website, so all of the people who are here today listening can certainly log back in on Monday, and we will make sure to have that information available so that we can finalize this, discuss overall so the next step would be to discuss the overall recommendations after we've gone through that, and then how we want to proceed, make a vote on a recommendation to award to the board, and then we would draft something to send to them to get in the packet, and then they would have the discussion and hopefully make the award on that night, on the 4th of August.
Okay.
Does that sound okay with everybody on the group?
that's fine with me. Does that meet the board's timeline? I'm sure.
It does. So all 3 respondents did graciously agree to extend the date for award to August 6th, which lines up with the board meeting on August 4th. So ideally we were hoping we could get it for the 21st, but it's just not going to be possible for us to do. So I think that it would be better to do it on Monday and have the time to have a good discussion about it and then send it to the board with our recommendation.
Great.
Okay.
Okay. Great.
So with that, first, I would like to thank all the individuals on the call for taking time out of, I know what are probably busy days for every one of you, to listen to the initial review of all of the respondents' proposals, and I certainly appreciate all the time of the 5 individuals that took the time out to review these. So with that, like I said, we will post a meeting for Monday at 3:30, and it will be on the town's website, and the Zoom link will be available within that posting. So
Great.
yes, I'll take some. I don't know if we have to do a motion to adjourn, but if somebody wants to make one, I'll be happy to.
Well, can I ask a weird procedural question?
Yes.
Only because I've never done the public reviews that we've had to delay. I assume most of the people listening are the proposers. So if they've heard some of our comments or anything and they attempt to reach out with clarification, are we allowed to utilize that as part of prior reviews, or are we just, okay,
No.
I'm
We're
fine. I believe that's obviously the best way to do it. I just didn't know if
Yeah.
that would be attempted so that
No.
where
We can't,
everybody's clear that we're done with those. The only thing we have now is the overall ranking once we get the references.
That's correct.
Okay.
All right. So I thank you. I don't know if we need a motion, but
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
second. Amy,
Oh, absolutely. I third.
Janet,
Agree.
Rachel,
Yes.
Mike,
Yes.
and I'm aye. So thank you once again, everybody, and we'll see everybody on Monday.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.